this is going to tie in a lot of the things we've already covered today, and I just want to give you a little bit more kind of an in-depth perspective on the whole structure of the fraternity and the individual chapters. So Joe mentioned, covered this pretty well at the start, the structure of the fraternity as a whole. The supreme governing body is known as the Grand Chapter. It has an official meeting every other summer in the even years called Convocation. It's where a lot of things get voted on, policies get put into place, policies might be changed. It rotates at different sites around the country. I believe you mentioned it was in 2014. 2014 was in Orlando, Florida, and this next year, 2016, it will be in Las Vegas. So if you weren't thinking about going now, think about going. So from an executive standpoint, the fraternity is headed up by the Grand Council. Grand Council consists of 7 members. And underneath them, they have a staff specializing in various areas, whether it be expansion, chapter services, finance, communications, the whole bit. And like Joe had mentioned before, the new headquarters in Lebanon, Tennessee. And I kind of want to think of the Grand Chapter kind of like a macrocosm of an individual chapter. You have your Grand Council, which is like the executive board of an individual chapter. Then you have all the staff beneath them, which kind of serve as like the committees. Then you have all the individual chapters beneath them, which would be kind of like the individual active brothers. So this next diagram, you're going to see a decent amount of. It's the standard layout of the chapter. It's kind of uniform. Things might be a little different, varying from place to place, but it's a pretty good general idea. And I like to refer to this as a skeleton structure because everything's intertwined. One piece is dependent on the other, so on and so forth. So, starting, let me just go back for a second. You'll see at the top here, the chapter is going to have actually 2 institutions or governing bodies that are going to influence it. That's going to have to answer to. You have Sigma Pi on a national level, and you have to have its host college or institution. So, starting first down from the chain from the Sigma Pi direction, we have the Province Archon, and that's a nice picture I dug up from about 10 years ago of me and the 2 guys that served as a Province Archon while I was an undergraduate, Paul and Joe. Joe, do you still have that hat? Shouldn't even have asked. That was in the middle of a long night of studying and church going in Nashville, Tennessee. So your Province Archon is going to keep an eye on the province and support all the alumni clubs, chapters, and most importantly, any expansion efforts that can be made within the province. And he's going to work closely with all the chapters to promote the good of the province. He's got direct contact with all the chapters, so he can bounce ideas off of them, kind of offer advice to individual chapters who may be struggling. TCNJ has a problem with something. Hey, well, I was at Rutgers last week and they had a similar problem and they did this. It's all intertwined. We all work together. It is important to note that it's a volunteer position. These guys are putting forth a lot of time and effort, and it's a lot of the goodness of their hearts. Beyond that, working a little bit closer and more direct with each chapter is the chapter director. He's going to be the primary liaison between the chapter and the national office. It's not necessarily, doesn't have to be an alumnus of that particular school. In probably most cases, it's not. But the position is required by the fraternity that there is a director for every chapter. He's going to be, like I said before, in very close contact with the undergraduate chapter, hopefully attending all of their meetings and their events, helping them plan things, offering any advice or insight that he can from his experience, and oftentimes a lot more. For instance, a man whose name you've heard a couple times today, who's pictured up there, Don Cox, a past Grand Sage of the fraternity. He was my chapter director at the College of New Jersey, and he did, among other things, first of all, he bought our house for us. And we're the only fraternity on that campus to own its own house. And that is probably one of our biggest assets as a recruitment tool, and just really established our base very quickly at the campus. it's really no secret that the success of these chapters in the past 10, 15 years has a lot to do with the chapter directors and province archons that have served in that time. It's no coincidence. I always like to say behind every great chapter is a great chapter director. You know, you really can't do it without them. You need, as strong as your individual members may be, you always need that extra level of guidance. So coming from the other direction a little bit are the host institutions, and John covered this very well earlier. I'll just offer a couple of other points. Like we had discussed, every school is going to have its own set of rules, regulations, and the term host institution is it's kind of a blanket term. It's also going to include not just the actual school, but their student life office, any IGC or IFC directors. It's anyone affiliated with the college or university that you're going to be dealing with. One of the biggest points we had talked about earlier was schools and how they might seem to have an agenda against Greek life or against your chapter itself. I think it's important to note that every college is going to have its different priorities, and you have to remember that a college is, even though it's an educational body, it's also a business in some sort. And they have, just like any other business, a lot of customers they need to satisfy. And in the case of higher education, those are very high-paying customers. And the fact of the matter is, Greek organizations, they provide a social life for the campus, and there's risk associated with that. Despite any other good you might do, no one wants to get that call. No parent wants to get that call at 3 in the morning that their son or daughter is in the hospital because they drank too much, or they got injured in a hazing accident, or anything like that. I think, and we don't want that to happen either. I think the best thing you can take, and I said it to my TCNJ guys before they had to leave, a chapter that's run the right way and consists of guys doing the right things, that are raising money for charity, doing the community service, doing all that stuff, being exemplary scholars, being involved on campus in areas outside, in addition to the fraternity. A well-run chapter is going to thrive, no matter what its surroundings are. And even though it might not seem like that all the time, a chapter that does the right things is not going to go unnoticed. So if you can think of the school as an asset for you and more like a friend and not an adversary, it's just going to be better off for everyone. And the primary extension of the school that would deal more hands-on with the chapter is the faculty advisor. That's required by the local institution. He is responsible to the college if a chapter gets in trouble, but it's important to note that doesn't have to be the only time you interact with him. He can be a very good resource in terms of academics, networking, so on and so on. So moving on to the chapter itself. Naturally, it's all of the undergraduate active brothers plus their new members, so it's all you guys. And they're going to represent Sigma Pi on campus, nationally, locally, to each other's families and everything. And there's a lot of responsibility, I think, that comes along with that. One chapter, sometimes even one person can single-handedly frame another person or group's impression of Sigma Pi as a whole. Like Joe had mentioned, when you're wearing our letters, there's a lot that comes with it. So you want to make sure you're representing it in the way that you want it to be represented, the way you want someone to see you, putting your best foot forward. And finally, it's easy to kind of lose the perspective of the individual chapter in the mix because there's so many levels of governance and so many national events and so many big things that Sigma Pi is a part of. But chapters are the lifeblood of Sigma Pi. It's kind of like that saying, you can't see the forest through the trees. If it weren't for undergraduate chapters day in and day out, there would be no fraternity. I mean, this is what it's all about. So going a little bit further into the structure of the chapter, at the top you have the executive council, and they really need to be the face of your chapter. They need to be dependable in good times and in bad. Anything that goes wrong on the executive council can have a very dangerous domino effect internally. And I think one of the most important things is putting the right men in the right positions. Now that sounds like a cliche, and it sounds like common sense, but one thing you have to remember is that elections, when you consider who you're going to put into these positions, these elections can't be popularity contests. They need to be taken very seriously. I remember our election meetings would probably go till about 12:30, 1 in the morning sometimes, till we were kicked out of whatever campus building we were in. It was that big a deal. And your execs, they need to be very mature. They have to be able to put things in perspective, work well under pressure, and also have a very good judge of character for knowing how to evaluate certain members and what positions to put them in. And probably the most important thing, and this can get lost in the mix because you think, all right, let's just put our 7 most dependable, responsible guys on the exec board and it'll be fine. It's also very important to remember what skill sets need to match with the job descriptions. So my treasurer, my 3rd counselor, is, all right, he's a good guy, everyone likes him, and he's dependable, but if he's terrible with money, he can't balance his own checkbook, actually you guys might not know what a checkbook is, can't balance his own bank account, then he shouldn't be my 3rd counselor. If my 4th counselor, my secretary, is late to things all the time and his room's a mess and he's not organized, then how can I depend on him necessarily to get all the office reports all the time? The analogy I like to use is that the executive council is like the eyes and ears of the chapter. They need to have kind of that higher sense and really know everything that's going on in the chapter before it even takes place. So beyond that would be the committee heads or chairmen. And these guys are, most chapters, they have an application system where the executive board will actually review the applications for each respective position. The vice president or 2nd counsel will make his recommendations on who he thinks would be the best for each respective position, whether it be social, rush, brotherhood, intramurals, alumni relations, anything like that. And then those actual appointments will be agreed upon by the whole executive. Naturally, a committee head is going to lead a committee. He's going to delegate responsibility, no matter how big his chapter is or how big the committee is, whether he's got 6 guys working for him or he's got 1 guy working for him, or if he's the entire committee himself. They're going to put together, plan, operate a lot of events. As I'm sure you know, the rush chair is going to, he's responsible for reserving the rooms and, putting the speakers together and all that, making sure the word gets out, deciding on the rush theme for the semester. And, there's a litany of responsibilities no matter what the position is. And the final thought I wanted to leave about the committee heads is that if your executive board is the eyes and ears of your chapter, then I really like to think of the committee heads as the arms and legs. Those are the guys that they're putting a lot of the grunt work in. They're getting a lot of the things done that really make a fraternity what it is. So this is just a quick sampling of the kind of committees you'll see in most chapters. On the left, you have the standing committees, which are pretty much in every single chapter. And on the right, you'll have ad hoc committees, which are going to be there depending on the time of year or what your chapter's needs might be. For instance, if you're a little bit of a bigger chapter with a bigger alumni base, on the right side, you see alumni there. Technically, the 1st counselor is supposed to be an alumni liaison. Some chapters choose to have an alumni relations chair. Just take that if it's a much bigger task. Another thing that's probably just as important down at the bottom right would be a web page or some sort of social media presence, because if you're not on social media, you're just, you're not present at all. And it's also very important not only to have a presence, but to make sure that presence is very well policed. Like we said, putting your best foot forward and representing yourself the way you want to be represented. It's also important to note that certain committees really entail, their tasks really require the work of the entire chapter. you know, like brotherhood, social, rush. I mean, I like to think the entire, like I've said in presentations past, the entire chapter is a brotherhood community. You know, that's what we're here for. Same thing with socials. We're social fraternity. That's one of the pillars of why we exist. And obviously recruitment and rush, because it's our own job and our own responsibility to replace ourselves. So beyond that is just the population of the active brothers. So that's going to encompass everyone in the chapter. Even if you're not on any committee, or if you don't have a position, and for you guys that are pledging right now, this is the group you're going to be in once you're initiated. But you still have, you know, your obligations, your responsibilities to try to, you know, keep an eye out for potential new members, perform your community service, all that stuff. And this is a really good way, when you're a younger guy, your involvement just when you first become a brother is a really good way to show your worthiness if you do want to hold a position in the future, if any certain position interests you. You know, if you're, say you want to be a treasurer down the road, then it might be good to get on a fundraising or finance committee and prove your worth that way. I think something that gets lost in the mix is that someone might say they're just a brother. Just because you don't have a position does not mean that you're never just a brother. If one of the guys that was a couple years older than me when I was active used to say, there's no position higher, no position more prestigious in this fraternity than the position of being a brother. And what he meant by that was that everyone's opinion, everyone's actions, everyone's thoughts, no one is more valuable than the other, no matter what position you hold or don't hold. That's why I like how in this diagram the active brothers are on the bottom right there, because it's kind of like they're holding everything up. Because without the involvement of the entire population of brothers, a fraternity is going to crumble. And I put it in a different color here just so it stands out a little bit. Obligations number 6 and number 10. Can anyone off the top of their head give me the 6th obligation? Strive at all times to cooperate for the good of the fraternity. That means that you have a level of responsibility at all 24/7, regardless of what your position might entail. It's your job to do whatever is best for the fraternity. And obligation number 10. And being an exemplary Sigma Pi, means, once again, doing absolutely everything you can when asked, whether you feel like it or not, whether you agree on it or not, because that's how chapters stay healthy. Finally, we get down to the new members, or pledges. Your initial task is obviously learning about Sigma Pi on a national level and on a local level, your own chapter's history, the entire fraternity's history. And its purpose is not to just throw you through a bunch of new guy stuff, it's to prepare you for things you're going to see as you become an active member of the chapter, and to really give you an appreciation for what you're becoming a part of. You know, each chapter is going to have its different framework and approach. A lot of that's dependent on what the time frame is mandated by the school. But at the end of the day, it always comes down to learning, and not only learning them, just being able to recite them or write them down in order, actually applying them, the 10 obligations, knowing what they mean. And if you really take those to heart, you're going to hit the ground running and don't look back. And what I always tell to new members whenever I'm given the opportunity to speak to them is that great pledges turn into great brothers, and great brothers make great chapters. You might see an instance where a guy who isn't a great pledge ends up turning it around once he's active and becoming a great brother, but 99.9% of the time, a guy who's a great pledge is going to end up a great brother, because he set the tone for himself that early. Another thing is that your esteem for the fraternity will never be higher than it is right after you're initiated and in your first semester or two as an active pro. So when you first get in, just know that a strong pledge class can absolutely rejuvenate the fraternity. It happened my senior year. We brought in a class of 7 guys in the fall of my senior year, and our fraternity we'd gone into a little bit of a rut. We won the Grand Sage Award in 2004, didn't win it in 2006, and we thought some people were getting complacent. We brought in 7 guys the fall of 2006, and that was the first time we had a fall class in my 4 years there. And all of those guys, I think half of them ended up being exec board members. Some of them were even exec board members as recently as the next semester, if I'm not mistaken. They all brought great attitude and great energy, and they really helped turn things around. And as a result, TCNJ won the Grand Sages Cup again in 2008, and actually the following 2 competitions as well, 2010 and 2012. I wanted to close just by saying what you guys are about to become a part of. It's very important to everyone in this room, all the alumni, anyone else. We're all here because we were a part of something great when we were in college. I wasn't really hell-bent on joining a fraternity when I stepped on the TCNJ's campus as a freshman, but something stuck out to me about Sigma Pi. Those guys knew how to have fun, but everyone knows how to have fun in college, or I sure as hell hope. But they really knew how to take care of business. They were really organized. There was something about them that made me say, that's the kind of organization I want to be a part of. And that's the kind of organization I want all you guys to be a part of. This province, like we've said before, and we'll say it 1,000 times, but it bears repeating, has done a lot of great things. A lot of great things. Joe ran down the list of awards. We can talk about awards for an hour and a half if you want. Something that is also should be taken into account. There was a span of 22 years, from 1990 to 2012, where there was at least one New Jersey guy on the Grand Council. Between Don Cox and Chris Brown, 22 years we had New Jersey presence on the Grand Council. It's very important to know that, despite the relative small size of our state, the New Jersey province carries a lot of weight on a national level. I think also the size of our state is an asset, because in a lot of provinces where schools are a lot farther apart, you can't do quite as many events like this. Everyone is within driving distance with each other. You can do these events twice a year. You can go to other chapters' events. You can go to other chapter social functions, and it just makes all of your bonds that much stronger. I think you might wonder why the guy who's been out of college 8 years is giving the presentation on the structure of a chapter. And it's a fair question to ask, but I think what it comes down to is that what it takes to run a successful chapter doesn't change. The college environment changes. And, college has changed a lot just since I've been out of college. I can only imagine what it's like to be in college in the Tinder era. Maybe you want to share your stories, we can do that later. But seriously, what it takes to run a successful chapter, that stays the same no matter whether it's 2015, 2005, 1995, it doesn't matter. And I'll just leave you with one quote from Bill Parcells, who I believe is the best football coach of our lifetime, and certainly my favorite. And he said after he won his first Super Bowl, winning a championship like this, it's like a blood transfusion. Between him and all the players and coaches that he was working with, it's like you receive their blood, they receive your blood, and you have that bond for the rest of your life. No one can ever take it away from you. Nothing can ever change it. And that's exactly how I feel about being a member of Sigma Pi. And I hope that's exactly how you feel one day, hopefully very soon. Once again, thank you very much.